Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today, Natalie, Andrea, and myself finishing up the Q&A that we did not finish last week. I still have a lot of questions, so I'm excited to get into it. Andrea, last week you did a client shout out to start things off. I want to shout out my client Lauren for buying the domain www.jackedmoms.com just because that's hilarious to me. Lucrative business deal for sure, like big business coming to that website. I can't believe that nobody had bought it. Um, if anybody buys jackedvascularmoms.com, however, I will find you because I got to get that trademarked. Anyone else want to shout out any clients before we get into it? If not, we can roll it. All right.
Is it
Go
is
ahead.
my client Jasmine's it's my client Jasmine's birthday today. So I'm gonna
Happy
say
birthday,
happy birthday,
Jasmine.
Jasmine. Yeah.
Happy birthday. Are you guys waiting on me?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
No, it's
What's
sorry, my connection froze for a second there. All right, let's move past this and continue. Happy birthday, Jasmine. I'm sorry, I think I missed some of that, but shout out to you, Jasmine. Happy birthday. Um, to kick things off, I think this is directed at Andrea. Want to hear about your vacuums and core training, what you did and why you did what you did. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah. Um so it's gonna be hard to gather my thoughts on that because I feel like I was starting to get in a nice routine with everything. And then I had some pretty severe rib pain that popped up, and I still am not 100% clear on why or what was going on there. But I had to stop a lot of different things to see if I could get that pain to go away because it was really interrupting my posing. So I had I do still do morning vacuums. So I have a morning vacuum routine that is not quite as structured now. I was kind of going through an actual program with it. And basically, what that does is it strengthens your TVA, and it can get like some rib mobility improvements too, because whenever you do the big exhale, you're like drawing everything in and like engaging TVA, but also bringing your ribs like together and kind of like
Mm.
smaller. And then whenever you do the inhale, or well, not inhale, sorry, like drawing in of your core for the vacuum itself, you're getting rib expansion. So it kind of takes your ribs through a full range of motion as well, which can be helpful for core function. And so that's improving your control with your TVA. And you think about your TVA as your corset muscle, like it's the deepest core muscle that you have. And if you have poor TVA control, your your waist is going to look larger, like your belly is just going to be like a little bit more protruded. Whereas if you have better core control or TVA control, or strength, then you're going to be able to hold it in tighter, and basically have like more endurance over that hold throughout the day. I was also working in some things with my primers in training that I was theorizing was going to help with core overall. So one of those things was a row with rotation and reach on the cable. So basically think like you're taking your thoracic spine through full rotation as you pull. And then sometimes I would also, if I was able to use the functional trainer, I would also push with the opposite arm. And so basically taking your thoracic spine through that rotation and loading it, which is going to help reinforce that range of motion. So if your thoracic rotation is limited, then basically you're just going to like any limitation in mobility, with like your rib cage, you're going to your breath is going to find another area to come out. So like if you can't breathe into the sides of your rib cage or into your back, and there's like restrictions there, then you're not really going to be able to get a full inhalation, exhalation, and movement of your diaphragm up and down. And so that breath has to find other places to come out. And so you're not going to be able to brace with like a tighter core canister. I'm not like 100% solid on all of this, so I may be saying something a little bit
You sound
incorrect.
very smart right now, regardless. So, okay. But
And I was doing a few other things like incorporating some like side planks or cable chops into my movement again, just like making sure that I could move in all directions and make sure that there wasn't any one like restriction on my rib cage, because the rib cage plays so much into like how you're able to brace your core, and then that therefore like how I can keep core control on stage.
okay, okay, very, very insightful. Before your rib stuff flared up, did you have like a daily stomach vacuum routine? What was that like?
Yeah, I was doing a waste in time, her programming,
Yeah.
and I think that what really flared it up. So I think there's some major tightness going on with my obliques on the left side where it attaches at the very bottom of the rib cage. So whenever I started doing the vacuums that were in like a side plank position, that's when there was like a lot of pain going on there. I think it
Yeah.
just pulled too hard on that lower rib, which already feels like it's maybe like out of the position that it's supposed to be in.
Okay.
But yeah, I was doing vacuums in all different positions that she had me in. So basically, like moving through a progression where you focus on, the breath moving up and like pelvic floor coming up. I couldn't even explain it. It was different every like 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
But yeah, but I really honestly though I think that there is something to that, like that or LPF is like the overarching thing that she is using, low pressure
Mhm.
fitness, I think it is. But I really think that if you're just doing consistent daily vacuums, regardless of the position that you're in, I think that that is like the 95% of it is just keeping that consistency going.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting. Like I have in my program like 5 rounds of vacuums every morning that I do. I just do them standing or I'll like leaning over the counter. I find like I can get a bit better into that. But like a side plank vacuum, I didn't even know that was a thing, which does sound quite challenging.
Yeah, and the theory with that is she was saying it helps to draw your waist in
Yeah.
here from the side. And I'm sure that that is really useful. And she said that she sees a big difference in the actual like waist tape measure size. I just, as soon as I started doing them, flared up that pain pretty severely. I'll probably try those again at some point and see if I can make some progress there. But
Very interesting. Yeah. I had never even really thought about all this stuff until more recently, like working on my own posing and not just like the vacuum, but also like, hey, can I kind of pull my obliques in more as well? Uh, Natalie, do you have vacuums in your routine consistently?
Yeah, I've been doing vacuums every day for the last like 3+ years.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I should have known.
yeah, yeah. Um, if you're serious about getting on stage, you probably should because I can't think of any division where you don't want a small waist
Yeah.
and you don't want that core control. Um, I will say like a dance background is really helpful because anyone who has done like something like ballet knows the feeling of like keeping the sternum up while keeping your like core in but still breathing, so you're kind of like breathing through your chest a little bit more so that your abs aren't going in and out. So
Yeah.
that's something that is helpful if you have that background. What Andrea is speaking to is like that rib cage expansion. And so what we find is like most people fall into one of two buckets. Those that are like a little bit more like flexible in their thoracic. So a lot of times these are people that you do see with the rib cage flare. And they're like almost going the other extreme. And then we have those that are a little less mobile through their thoracic. And a lot of this is limited by their like lack of rib cage expansion. So like they can't get their rib cage moving.
Gotcha.
So I am on the other extreme where I'm like I need to get it under control. Like it's a little bit too much. But I do have a lot of stuff in my program. Like I have some like side lying foam roller decompression. And I have a lot of stuff that will like target the serratus, which like really goes hand in hand with like a lot of that rib cage control. So things like your half kneeling landmine press, I know like a lot of my most of my clients are doing that. And like alternating like cable presses and like single arm cable loaded things are all for that.
Hmm.
Another one that I really like is like the I think Andrea is doing it now too, but the one arm dumbbell row,
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
where you're like braced on an incline bench is
Yeah.
like really great for like obliques and all of that stuff. Um, so a lot of that stuff is really helpful as well. There's one other point I had that I'm now like losing. But but yeah, there are a lot of things you can kind of address through programming, whether it be a primer or movements within your actual programming, and then combined with things like the actual breath work, like vacuums and stuff. Um, but yeah.
So insightful. And I think that's a good takeaway in general. Like we can address so many things within programming. I think a lot of times people think if I don't move well at a certain joint or like this movement causes me pain, I need to like, not that there's anything wrong with PT. Sometimes like PT is the answer, but a lot of times it is like, hey, we actually can and should address this with your programming, not just like we're going to do band external rotations or whatever until it goes away.
Right, and some of it too is like you have to think about most conventional programming, especially like the quote optimal crowd, who is like going to basically have you in the like the frontal and the sagittal plane mostly, right? And like no one's doing anything in the transverse plane. And then you kind of extrapolate that over years, and like we're just not moving in that plane. So like
Mhm.
incorporating things like your Paloff presses and like cable wood choppers and things like that, where you're actually getting like a lot of that rotational element or anti-rotation, are things that you can kind of like sprinkle intelligently and strategically throughout an otherwise well-balanced program. But again, if you look at your like core meat and potatoes hypertrophy programs, you're mainly going to see like push pull, squat, lunge, and we're not really seeing a lot of like lateral side flexion and like things like that. So,
Love it. Very insightful for both of you. We better continue or we'll have to make this a three-part Q&A. Why is fasted cardio okay, but fasted weight training not recommended? So we just have to look at what's the primary outcome that we want from each of those. With cardio in the context of fat loss, which is typically like if I'm having someone do fasted cardio, it is because we're trying to push fat loss. Um, your body will more readily use the fuel that's available in your bloodstream. So if we go into a cardio session fasted, we're not going to have a lot of carbohydrate readily available in the bloodstream. We'll be more likely to use fat as the fuel source. If we have just eaten, we'll be more likely to use carbs. It's somewhat splitting hairs. Like, is this make or break for fat loss? No. But if we were going to argue for fasted cardio, hey, okay, we're going to be using more of that fat to fuel the cardio, and then we are using more of those carbs later to fuel our training rather than burning through them in our training session. And then we can also just utilize things like we've talked a lot about yohimbine. If you have any questions on yohimbine and its crazy powerful effects, DM Natalie about it. She'll be happy to answer. Um, like we can use yohimbine in concert with fasted cardio to essentially burn a bit more stubborn body fat specifically. So like those would be the two main reasons. Fasted training, we just aren't going to be in an optimal situation from a fueling perspective, right? Like there, our goal isn't to burn fat. There, our goal is getting the best training stimulus possible. We will train better if we have some carbs in our system. We're setting up in a more anabolic environment, more conducive to growth if we have some amino acids from protein in our system as well. So it's just going to be more ideal to build muscle. So again, it's just about what's the outcome we want from fasted cardio versus training. Anyone else have anything to add there?
yeah, I think just the idea that when we're doing cardio, we're not trying to use raw materials for anything.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to expand on that or good?
No, I mean, I could, but Then we'd have to
I
make
think
this
we're
into
I
a
think we're
three-part
good.
episode.
Um, Nearing my goal physique, I've been tracking macros for years. How do I break free from tracking and live lean? Initial thought that pops in my mind. I don't want to sound like a dick, but if you're getting near to your goal physique, why do you want to stop doing the thing that got you near to your goal physique? Now, that doesn't mean you have to track constantly, but I do think there's an aspect of like, I would just probably look at how you're framing it. Like, I always use the analogy, imagine your physique is like an apartment, right? Like, the nicer the apartment you want to live in, typically the more rent you have to pay. Where there will be like, hey, we probably do track our food a good amount of the time if we want to be able to maintain this. Um, I'll be honest, I don't think I have a lot of good advice here. I would say probably keep tracking most of the time. And like you could probably like, hey, we could work in like a couple untracked meals per week as long as we're maintaining well. Like most clients in a building phase or even like a maintenance phase sometimes, like, hey, we can easily work in like an untracked meal. I like to give people like an untracked meal a week if they're able to keep it in check in a building phase, especially. But the reality is like you didn't just fall into this physique. It sounds like you've been working towards it for years. It's probably going to take a good amount of intentional effort to maintain it as well. And that probably will entail doing a lot of the things that got you here. Would you guys have any other input there?
I
If
think
your
the
idea of
stronger,
going untracked is now you're just eating those exact same meals but not putting them in an app, okay, then you can do that. But I think that a lot of people just have this idea that at some point they're going to be able to just eat whatever they want and call it intuitive eating and maintain where they're at. And that's just not the case for most people. I know for me, like my my appetite is just higher than my calories needed in order to stay at a body composition that I enjoy. And so intuitively, I would eat way more than what I do. I don't know if you guys have seen that thing where it's like, why don't you just listen to your body on Instagram? It's like, why don't you just listen to your body? And then the next clip is like me if I listen to my body, and it's like a guy eating cookies as cereal out of a big cereal bowl. It's like that's most people. That's how most people would be. Even if that, I mean, we're not taking it to that extreme, but it's just realistically not going to be possible for most people to be pretty lean and also not have some sort of measuring system that they're using.
Very well put. Keith?
that's pretty much exactly what I was going to say, especially what you started out with. But I would also add like the stronger your systems and foundations, and the more you rely on those, the better off you'll be. So, like Andrea started out saying, if your idea of going untracked is like, I'm still going to eat four or five, whatever, 4 meals a day, roughly consisting of a protein, a fat, and a carb, and like all you're really going to do is like maybe swap out like blueberries for raspberries occasionally or like chicken for turkey. Like that, I do believe you could maintain on that. But again, like Andrea started out saying, I think most people have this like concept of nirvana that they're going to reach, where like it's the magical land where I'm just going to know like how to regulate myself around Christmas cookies and like, and I'm going to switch up. I'm going to be able to be more spontaneous and do whatever I want whenever I want and maintain this. And so then to tie it all together with Jeremiah's point, like likely the systems that got you to your goal physique are going to need to stay in place to maintain your physique. So the stronger you make those foundations and your routine and your systems. So maybe you're like, again, you're eating roughly the same like 4 meals per day with those one-to-one swaps, and then allowing yourself like 2 meals out per week. One of those meals is a little bit more free and intuitive, let's call it. And then the other meal is something very basic, like a filet, a baked potato, and broccoli. But again, everything that I just talked through is still a system. It's not a free for all. So like you're gonna need guardrails basically.
It's a very good answer. Jeremiah is small. Thank you. Natalie's name is Jeremiah is small today. No one can see this, but um, I wanted to ask, as someone who's interested in working with your team, how do I know who is the right coach for me? I would be happy to work with anyone, but now I'm even more conflicted now that you have another team member. Shout out to Danny, who will be making her first podcast appearance next week. I There's really not a wrong answer here. From a skill set perspective, we are all very, very similar. We all get obsessed with the same things. We all like hyper fixated on the same things. We're all like, I mean, none of us really have any friends outside of each other. So we're constantly talking about what we're learning, constantly going back and forth in Slack on our calls. So like from an actual like what we can provide perspective, there's not really a gap anywhere, and the quality of the coaching is so important to us that like we won't allow someone to be on the team if there's a big gap, any gap, right? So it's more so I think about like from a personality perspective, is there a coach that clicks better with you? I mean, like Natalie and I have both coached a lot of moms as well, but sometimes someone will be like, I really like relate to Andrea because she has kids and I would like prefer to work with her. Or like, I'm a really mean person. I don't want to work with someone that's meaner than me. So then work with Natalie. But outside of that, it's really truly just like, I think it's more personality based who you feel like you mesh with. Do you guys have additional insight there?
I always tell my clients when they start out that they're not just getting me, like they are getting the rest of the team
Yeah.
because we are an actual team. Like we have a Slack channel. Um we collaborate. Like we're always throwing around different ideas, new things we're learning and implementing. We're troubleshooting together too. We celebrate one another's client wins. We always want like second and third, and now with Danny, fourth eyes on things. So, even though you directly be working with one of us, you're really getting all of us behind the scenes.
Pretty much anytime a client is struggling with something, the rest of the team knows about it. If the coach doesn't, if it's like, hey, I'm not sure how to manage this, or like, here's how I'm managing this, can I get you guys eyes on it? Like, that is a constant conversation whenever there's client challenges. So, yeah, it's very much like the entire team is working with you regardless. Anything else there before we continue? I just truly don't think there's a wrong answer. Cool. Um, all right. Advice for managing your nutrition around a major joint surgery. Limited activity for a few weeks. Anyone have good insight here?
I do have a new client actually just sent her plan over to her today, who is happens to be a doctor of physical therapy. And she is having a rotator cuff surgery in November. She basically has like a full like supraspinatus tear. Sounds horrible. Um, so that's pretty major, even though like supraspinatus is relatively little in terms of size. But that's like your shoulder, right? There is a lot of merit to continuing to train the other arm in that scenario. Actually, I have a current client who has like an arm thing going on. And so like we're doing a lot of single limb training. But there is some research that substantiates like sympathetic gains basically like over to the other side, which is kind of cool. And then obviously I'm going to assume this is like one joint, right? So it's either like let's call it a shoulder or like a hip or something. So if it's upper body, then we can still do lower. If it's lower body, we can still do upper. But the chances are there's still a lot we can do. And if you're someone who likes to train, which you probably are, if you listen to this podcast and asked us this question, focusing more on what you can do, I think is going to be more important. It could also, depending on, again, if it's your hip or your shoulder or something, you could maybe still get in some cardio of some sort, and kind of make it more like a cardio or endurance focused time in your training. While, hypertrophy, at least with that limb, can take like a back seat for a little while. But even just short answer, even just doing a little bit on the other side will benefit you. And then training the other extremities that you can, and staying positive. I don't know if
From a
that's specific enough,
nutrition
but
from a nutrition standpoint, because you can still do a lot of things, there's often not a major change that I'm making. Sometimes we'll go to rest day macros for a bit, and I'll also sometimes switch up the carbs and fats, or even just give them a calorie and protein target for a while to add a little bit of flexibility because oftentimes if it is a pretty major thing, we don't need quite as many carbs uh, to replenish glycogen and for training performance, but they do still need, your body still does need some calories just for the recovery aspect. And I think that people kind of underestimate what you need just to fuel that recovery process. So sometimes I'll shift that more toward fats.
I read that totally wrong. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I went into the training.
that's okay. I think that was valuable as well. I would just say as well, like, I mean, from a nutrition perspective, make sure you have plenty of omega-3s, gonna help with inflammation healing. If you really want to get into it, like some vitamin C can help with collagen synthesis. Honestly, though, like just make sure you're eating a nutrient dense diet. I wouldn't be in a deficit. I don't think I have anything else to add. Cool. Um, can you talk about the difference between training for strength versus hypertrophy? I was just talking about this with a client, a former CrossFitter. She was talking about how she used to be able to deadlift way more weight when she was doing CrossFit. And she sent me a picture of, or she sent me a video of her deadlift. And I was like, all right, let's look at the comparison between this and what your deadlifts look like now. Um, Now, strength training and hypertrophy, aka building muscle, don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like we will get stronger and we will build muscle oftentimes at the same time. If like the number one, like let's say you're like a power lifter, the number one goal is to lift as heavy a weight as possible, then we're going to try to be as efficient as possible, right? So I just love to use the example of like we think of how a power lifter would bench press versus somebody who's trying to build as much muscle with bench press would look quite a lot different. Power lifter would probably flare their chest a lot, big rib cage flare, take a little bit wider grip, and they would probably let the weight drop rather quickly. And like if I wanted to lift as much weight as possible, I would bounce it off of my chest at the bottom so I didn't have to work as hard and create as much fatigue in the bottom. And I could use some of that momentum and that stretch reflex from the bottom of the rep to help carry that weight up. Again, not having to work as hard in the bottom of the rep where it's the most difficult. On the flip side, if my goal was to build muscle, my goal is to maximize the tension that that tissue experiences. So I would want to do a more controlled eccentric or lowering portion of the rep. I might even like pause at the bottom of the rep. And I don't want to like go through excessive range of motion, but I want to make sure that my chest is trained through a full range of motion. So I wouldn't take like as wide of a grip. I would make sure that again, I can get like a full stretch on my pecs at the bottom of the rep, potentially even like a very brief pause there and make sure that I have to work very hard as I press the weight up. Now, again, like if the goal is just maximizing the weight it can move from point A to point B, that's not going to be the most optimal. But the goal here is driving the most tension to the target tissue. So in that case, that would allow me to get a lot more of that. Um, and I mean, in essence, like we can apply that to almost all of our training across the board, where it's just the difference between trying to like move the maximum load from point A to point B to try to drive maximum tension into a target tissue. Y'all have anything else you would add there? No? Cool.
Really, it's typically a rep range target difference.
That is very
Uh,
true.
with strength training, a lot of times you're going to train in the 1 to 5 rep range, and in hypertrophy, there is some merit to like around that 5 or 6, but a lot of times it's more like 6 to 15,
Nine,
anywhere within that
six.
range.
Yeah, like 6 to 9 is ideal. Sorry. Anything else?
No,
Cool. Yeah, largely rep range changes, execution changes, and your
you're
exercise
also
selection
not
as well.
training close to failure a lot of times with strength. You're
It's
keeping more
true.
reps in reserve when the goal is strength, because it is really neurologically taxing, but you don't want to get to the point where you're accumulating that like burn like you are in hypertrophy training. You want to keep some in reserve so that you can do like 5 to 8 sets of something.
Yeah, strength is much more of a skill. That's another good point. Strength is much more skill based. It is a large neurological component there. So a lot of times you might be practicing the same movements with more frequency and more volume, but again, less important for us to push as close to failure as when hypertrophy is the goal. Um, I'm gonna vote not it for taking this one. At what point does an inability to stop BLTs become disordered eating? Just don't have a good answer for that. Anyone have a better answer?
Not really. I mean, I guess if it starts to become compulsive, like you're fully aware in the moment and you just can't stop yourself. I'm definitely not qualified on any sort of eating issue, like eating disordered eating issues to answer that, but I think that the compulsive aspect of it is probably part of it.
I would really probably, if it's a concern, I would probably just chat with a specialist who is more qualified in this regard. I don't know that I can give good insight on like, hey, this is disordered or not. Anything for you to add, Jeremiah is small?
I was just gonna say, I don't feel qualified to deem something disordered or not.
Yeah, I would agree. Cool. Um, Single leg training and correcting imbalances. For example, I have one quad bigger than the other and one glute more developed than the other. In both cases, the smaller side is also harder to activate, even with single leg work. Would love to know your tips for these types of situations because I'm sure I'm not that special and unique. You are special, don't worry. But surely others must also have these issues. Possibly worth mentioning, but also obvious, my small quad and small glute are on the opposite sides of the body. Curious about how you deal with these kinds of things where people have cross-body deficiencies in terms of activation versus one entire leg that's weaker and smaller.
It's
Natalie, I feel
most
like you go
likely,
ahead.
yeah, Natalie, you're probably going to have the best answer here. Go ahead.
What are you saying? Because I'm so uneven? Wait.
Because we've seen what your back pose looks like is what we're saying.
Um, I think I have always been a big believer that things like lagging. Okay, I'm gonna start out by saying totally normal to have one side that moves better and activates better, you connect with better than the other side. Like totally
Sure.
normal. I do not know anyone that just feels like they got it going on, like right arm, right leg, left leg. Like probably not. So probably whatever is lagging. So let's take like the small quad or like let's take the small glute since I'm into glutes right now. Um Probably something not moving well at the hip. And your other side of your other hip probably moves better. Like that is a very non-specific but like specific answer. Like that's probably what's going on. So I would definitely recommend getting with a qualified trainer who can assess your movement, write you an intelligent program that addresses these things, and get to work on these things. Um, Short of like seeing you myself, a lot of times I'll also say like I am very picky with my own physique about my imbalances. And that is because I'm in a physique sport where balance and symmetry is like literally the definition of my category. Um, like everything needs to be in balance and look symmetrical. So it's like a giant eyesore to me when I can see one side looking differently than the other. But outside of that scenario where you're in a physique sport where this is being picked apart, I'm not going to tell you it doesn't matter and that you shouldn't address it. Like, again, through an intelligent program with a coach that knows what they're doing, that can kind of see your movement. And chances are, even without looking at your body, they can just see it in your movement. And so, like, working through those things is going to address this. Um, but outside of that, I bet you any amount of money that, like, someone else looking at your body probably won't notice or see it. So again, I'm not telling you like not to worry about it and it's not worth working on, but like, yeah, I think a little perspective in terms of like how, no, how stressed you need to be about this. I think we get a lot of my newer clients are like always pointing out their imbalances and like, oh, do I need to worry about this? It's like, yeah, well, like this will get taken care of. But back to my initial answer, which is you're still always going to have one side that moves better than the other side.
Movement at the hip is exactly what I was going to say. Too, whenever there's a difficult time activating the glute, that's typically like we're not accessing the hip internal rotation on that side. So, what I would do in this kind of case is start out with some primers like hip airplanes and potentially also some like seated calf raises and things like that to see if there's any deficiency at movement in the ankles or like foot pronation too. And if you're starting with those kind of things, maybe even like some single leg like calf bridge glute activation work just to get that blood flow and like feel of it. If you start there and then start on your weaker side with unilateral movements like a split squat, then that's probably going to help even out that discrepancy. And then what I would do is, okay, if you fail at 8 on that side and go to the other side and you have more than 8, just stop there so that you're doing an even amount of reps. And that way you're sort of slowly evening it out over time.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big like the programming isn't really that different. You'll be able to identify a movement discrepancy, and that's the root cause of this. I would also say in terms of like the activation, like if you look at it's like okay, like our hip internal rotation sucks on the left side, and that's kind of the root cause of this. Like us working to address that and then put you in a better position will fix it. Like with the like activation side of things, part of why you feel the other side working more, the stronger side working more is just because you have a bigger muscle, right? So like that, I wouldn't worry too. I would like focus on putting yourself in a proper position when you watch back your training videos. Like, okay, I can see I'm executing this well, and like that will improve over time. But I wouldn't worry too much about the sensation or like activation side of things. Cool.
Like
Anything
you
else?
guys,
Go ahead.
right? Yeah, it's like it's just so incredibly normal for like one
Right,
hip to move so much better than the other, even in
for
people
sure.
without these glaring discrepancies. Like how many
Yeah.
clients do you have doing like a single like a B stance RDL where one side looks like really solid and the other side is like
Oh
totally
yeah.
different? So it's
Yeah.
and that's why like we do want unilateral work in your program is because
Hmm.
that will expose these things and we can address them.
For sure.
Yeah, if
I
you
would
if
say,
you just immediately start out on like a heavy leg press and you're not doing any sort of primer work or anything whatsoever, that's probably not the move. But if you can get the joints moving right and then start out with your unilateral work, that's like you said, the programming isn't crazy or anything, but that's how you work on that joint movement and ultimately down the road that leads to the a little bit more balancing of the imbalances.
for sure. Yeah, this is definitely a situation where I would bias a lot more like unilateral movement that doesn't have a lot of external stability, right? So it wouldn't be like a single leg press. It would be a dumbbell split squat. Again, and we would be able to see pretty quickly the discrepancy, like, hey, can we get into that hip shift? Um, how do our hips move as a whole getting into this movement? And that would give us, it would just make it so easy to expose that. And that would also kind of be like your prehab slash rehab work to address it largely. Anything else? Cool. Or any final thoughts? That is the. Oh wait, Andrea, how is the reverse going? Shelby wants to know.
I do think we talked about that last week actually, but it's
Anything
going
new?
well. Huh?
It's a week
Anything?
later. We
It's
need
a
we
week
need
That's
this
later.
week's
true.
update.
Things are exactly the same. It's going really well. I jumped up by like 6 pounds like pretty immediately right away. But even still now, since last week, just been holding really steady and feel really good. Training feels good. Digestion feels good. So I'm in a good spot.
Good. Glad to hear it. All right. Thank you guys for the questions. As always, if you enjoyed the show, do us a huge favor. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. If you would like to apply to work with our team, hit the link in the show notes, and we will catch you guys next time.